Hi, welcome to Paranormal Kativity. Fairies. My first real introduction to fairies was whenever I started dating Alex. I was hanging out with his mom, we were walking to the car, and she said, "Don't step on the fairies," when we walked through the grass. And I was like, okay. And she was like, "Well, you don't have to say it out loud, just say it in your mind." And just went on about it, which she's super into, like, magical, cool stuff, and I love it. I love it, love it. But at the time I was just like, that's a little odd. And so in my head, I had this mental block about fairies where I thought they were all like naked, beautiful women with like crazy iridescent wings sitting on flowers, fairies, right? It just never was something that resonated with me. I didn't really get it. I have many books about a lot of different topics because I consider myself like a paranormal and occult enthusiast, and so like anything about that kind of stuff, I just suck it in. I want all of it. And so I have this book on elementals, and it has, you know, elementals for all of the different elements, and it talks about how, you know, air elements, fairies are one of the ones considered in the air elementals. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, if a fairy is an elemental, and I feel like elementals kind of exist in my brain a little more than a fairy would, maybe that's what that is. Then I got on this whole tangent where I watched like every fairy thing that I could find on YouTube. There are some amazing fairy documentaries done out in, I want to say, Ireland, the Netherlands, that kind of region. 70% of the population believes in fairies there. And that blew my mind. I was like, that's really cool. But the more I listened to it, they don't believe fairies are these, you know, pretty naked chicks with wings just chilling. They see them as much different energies, and they can be a little darker and mischievous and territorial, and you never call them by fairies. They're like the kind little people or the good little people. Like, and you don't apologize to them. They don't like apologies. They'd much rather if you do something wrong, you make it right by offering them something. It was a totally different concept to me, and the more I the more I learned about that, the more I liked that kind of thought process. I had an experience recently where I think I might have encountered a fairy, and it was pretty freaking cool. So I was like, well, I might as well share it here. It's kind of the same magical, mythical stuff. Kelly and I were going to a park. We decided to go for a nature walk. We're just out walking. We're walking these paths and talking, and there's water. It's really pretty. And I see this leaf, and it's like the perfect shape of what you think a fairy's wing would be in nature. Like, it was like half the leaf, and it was broken up this way, and it was all like tattered and brown, and it was really cool looking. And so I picked it up, but it was stuck to the ground, so I had to like really force it off the ground. And I was like, Kelly, look, it kind of looks like a fairy's wing. And in my head, I thought maybe I would use it for like an art project in the future, so I was just gonna grab it. And so I get it, and as I'm walking towards her, I hear this rush through the brush, like almost like a snake, but I wasn't near like overgrown grass enough to where if it was a snake, I could see it. So I walk a few steps and the sound stops. And I look over, and then I walk a few more steps and stop, and the sound stops with me again. And I'm looking, and then I walk a little further, and the sound next to me stopped. And all of a sudden it hits me where I get this intuitive feeling like I just stole something from something. Like, I wasn't going to say necessarily it was a fairy, but I was like, I stole something from maybe a fairy. I don't know. I stole something. So I went back, I put it on the ground, and I said, if I took something of yours, here it is back. And then we also had like little like magical prayer things that we made out of natural things, and we were going to go find like a cool place to put them because we do little fun things like that. And so I did mine there along where I took it, and I also said, if there's anything that wants to come home with me that's not too offended by what I've done, feel free to come home with me. I think it would be really cool. So I said that. We go to leave. We leave the door open for a moment while we're like cleaning up the car and getting everything ready. We go home. I go to bed that night. In the middle of the night, the door ends up getting opened. In the like 4 years that we've lived here, the bedroom door is never just opened. It doesn't. And the dog is right there next to the door. If it was open, he would normally come in. He stayed out on the landing, and the door opened by itself. And Alex came upstairs, and he was going to go in the office or something, and he was like, hey, why'd you sleep with the door open? And I'm like, I didn't. And after that, like the next day, I kept feeling like things were not quite in their place. And the feeling went away rather rapidly, rather quickly, but it still creeped me out. And so I really don't know if that's like what it's like to be encountered with something like that. I still don't 100% know like my feelings on it. I feel like it's a lot stronger than it's ever been before, but I just want to know your guys' thoughts on if you're into that kind of thing or if that's something totally separate for you from like the supernatural. I've never really experienced anything with any other elementals of other sources other than the gnomes that I mentioned in the one video. We just made that as a joke. Like, it wasn't anything I think we actually thought of in a literal sense, and I still don't think of this in a literal sense. I feel like anything in that elemental realm is probably another dimensional being. And I know I read this awesome story, which I will try and link below. I found it through Pinterest, so I don't know if I can link through Pinterest from here, but it is on my Pinterest board. And it's a story about this lady who went to go investigate fairy hills, fairy homes, and it's like this notorious fairy hill, and she went there to study it and went missing. And then like years and years later, she was discovered roaming naked in this like frigid environment, speaking a language that nobody could understand, and the only tangible word that she could still say was their word for elf. And she never, at least last time it was updated, she never got her mental capacities back. She just blabbered in an incoherent language, and whenever she was like found on the hill roaming, she like walked on all fours and looked like some kind of creature. It was just one of the coolest stories ever. So stories like that made me go, yes, this has to be something that exists. So I think part of me just really wants it to exist. I would love to hear about any experiences you've had where you think something like another dimensional, elemental, small nature creature spirit thing came into contact with you, because I think it'd be a really fascinating thing to experience. Have an awesome one. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.